So the Rockets are done in 5 games. The Lakers dealt with them by doubling Harden and closing out really hard to shooters, and Anthony Davis too good, LeBron too good. Of course, the Rockets' horrible effort in the last game before the last 7 minutes or whatever did not help them. The Daniel House situation did not help them, but at the end of the day, Daniel House is a solid rotation player. So here we go. I mean, the offseason for the Rockets. This team has made some sort of splash every offseason for years now, and well, this one's going to be very interesting. I think the first guy you look at is Mike D'Antoni. He's probably gone. And I think the next question becomes just what type of shift does Houston have to make as a team with the roster and the game plan and all that stuff? I mean, we all know what the thing is. Harden does a whole lot of stuff. Westbrook does a decent amount of stuff. Shooters around him, no center, we get it. No mid-range jumpers, all that stuff. Well, I think what's been proven is that when you have a game plan, even if it's extremely effective, eventually you're going to face a team that's really, really good, has players as good, if not better than James Harden, and they're going to find ways to slow you down, and you're not going to have another thing to go to because you've only ever been doing one thing. I mean, the obvious counter to the Harden double teams was Harden do more stuff off the ball. Well, he hasn't done off the ball stuff in 6 years at this point, and you can certainly blame Mike D'Antoni for some of that. And so it's not shocking that they didn't go to it when it slowed down their offense so much because they weren't used to doing it, you know what I mean? The other thing was they were so content with Harden doing everything with Westbrook as the other guy, or you can take this back to Chris Paul if you want to, that the other guys besides Eric Gordon can't really do much off the dribble. I mean, when the Lakers are forcing PJ Tucker and Covington and whoever else to, drive because they're closing out on them so hard, well, they can't do anything. They're not guys who can dribble because the Rockets haven't prioritized getting enough ball handlers on this team. I mean, part of the reason why Andre Iguodala is such a beloved role player is because he can actually do something off the dribble, So when teams would leave him open during Golden State's whole run because they didn't have a lot of other options, it's not like he was just forced to take a three, and we know Iguodala's been iffy with his shooting, sometimes good, sometimes bad. He could just drive inside, and he could actually make the next play. PJ Tucker, Covington, other guys that Houston has acquired, Jeff Green, who they're giving minutes to, they just can't do that. And I think it would make sense for Houston to try to get more of those guys, which means, yeah, you might have to shift it up a little bit, but I mean, I think we saw in the series you have to. Now, the problem is they don't have a whole lot of assets left to get those kinds of guys. Now, there's probably going to be some talk about trading Westbrook. I don't think it's going to happen, partially because he's very difficult to trade. I mean, his age, his contract, but also there's a pretty low chance, I would imagine, that Houston can get a guy as good as Westbrook back. I mean, I think they pretty much got to make it work with Russ, you know what I mean? I don't know if there's some move out there where they can trade Westbrook to a team and that team gives them back 2 or 3 very good players who fit in well, because those guys are probably not going to be stars, we would imagine, unless some other team is just that desperate for Russell Westbrook. So I just, I look around the league a little bit, and I don't think there's a Westbrook trade there, and I think Westbrook can still be good for this team. Yeah, his playoffs were not great, and whether that's the quad, whether it's testing positive for the thing that I can't say or else YouTube's not going to like that, I don't know. But if you make me choose a side on the trade Westbrook thing, I don't think it's going to happen. So then it becomes, well, okay, what else is there? Well, there's Eric Gordon making $16.8 million next year. There's Robert Covington's $12 million. And the Rockets, most of their draft picks are locked up in protections. They don't have this year's pick at all. That's going to the Nuggets. So it's pretty tough to make moves because they traded basically everything else they had for Westbrook. They do have 2022 and 2023, though. The problem is that both of those picks are sandwiched in between protected picks, so it makes me feel like the Stepien rule might still apply. I don't know. It probably doesn't. I'm sure they've designed it in a way to where they can move one of those picks. And, I mean, if you combine one of those picks with Covington, who is a good player, makes $12 million, maybe you do it with Gordon. Maybe you do both of their contracts, and now you're into like the $30 million range. Could you get somebody? Sure. Who's the ideal type of guy for this team? I mean, it's basically Jimmy Butler, which that rumor was out there however long ago. Which, I mean, that's impossible now. Miami is very secure with their Jimmy Butler decision, but just that kind of guy, the wing who can go off the dribble, play off of Russ and Harden, create for themselves a bit, and still give you something defensively. Because then that just gives you an extra thing that you can do on offense. I mean, let's say they get a new coach who has Harden doing a little bit more off the ball. Not a whole lot, but a little bit more, okay? You do that, you also tell the players it's okay to take some mid-rangers, guys. It's not the end of the world if we shoot a few a game to, once again, just add an extra little thing. Because, I mean, I know it's tough to remember at this point, but remember back in the Spurs series when the Spurs, before the meltdown of Game 6 against no Kawhi in Houston, part of the reason the Spurs won that series is because they just backed up on every pick and roll because they knew James Harden wasn't going to take the pull-up like 14-footer, you know what I mean? Like, it's okay to shoot that. Kawhi makes every single one he attempts. So, I mean, if you have that, if you have some more Harden off-ball stuff, if you add one wing who can do something off the dribble, then maybe that's enough. Now, as I take a look at guys around the league, I mean, Gordon Hayward would be great. I don't want the Celtics to give him up, even if he keeps finding weird ways to get injured that have nothing to do with each other. Otto Porter in Chicago. I suppose if you wanted to get more offense out of the big man spot, Kevin Love, maybe. I wouldn't do it if I was Houston. I think Kevin Love is too risky with his injury stuff, and he's definitely declining, so I wouldn't, but maybe they'd be desperate enough to do that. Drew Holiday would be great, but whether he's available, I don't know. I guess you could put LaMarcus Aldridge into the same thing I just said for Kevin Love. At least with Aldridge, he's on a 1-year contract. And, I mean, to be honest, you could say he's not really declining like Kevin Love, and he also is not as much of an injury scare as Kevin Love, but he is old, so anyway, it's potential stuff. And again, between Gordon and Covington's money and one of the picks that they can hopefully trade, maybe, you know what I mean? If we talk about free agency a little bit, there's not a whole lot. They're at $130 million. They might have, a mid-level or a biannual or whatever exception you want to think of. Do I think we will see an actual center on this team next season? Yeah, probably, especially if there's a new coach. I wouldn't be shocked if they kept going with the super small ball thing, but just not for 48 minutes. I actually do want to talk about free agency more. So Houston is right now at $130 million. They don't have their pick, and they've got a couple of team options that they'll probably decline. There's Chris Clemens, who, to be fair, I don't really know much about. He's 5'9", so take that for what you will. They got David Nwaba, who I honestly forgot was on the team. They got Ben McLemore's non-guaranteed, which they might want to keep because he was kind of awesome when he played for them. The full mid-level, which is going to be about $9.7 million. Yeah, I think even if they use that full mid-level, I think they could still stay under the luxury tax. Unless, of course, the salary cap is lower than we think right now, which is possible for obvious reasons, but what type of player do they need? I mean, if we think about that wing type of guy who can do something off the dribble a little bit, can you get that guy for that amount of money in this free agency? I think my answer would be probably not. I mean, maybe Marcus Morris is that guy, but that'd be a lot less money than what he's making right now. Paul Millsap potentially, but outside of one great game against the Clippers, he's on the downswing. Jay Crowder certainly fits into what they're already doing, but what they're already doing resulted in them losing in 5 games to the Lakers. So, yeah, it's not great. There are some options there, but it's not some obvious name who you just picture on Houston and it's like, oh, that's a fantastic fit. That's going to make them a lot better. And you know what? This is pretty much it. I feel like a lot of this is going to have to be them deciding if they still want to go with this super small ball thing or at least get one center. There are a couple of decent enough centers who can give you some minutes on the open market this offseason. And then I think it's, seeing if you can make some sort of a move. You do have those picks that I think you can at least trade one of. You do have a couple of contracts, mainly Covington, which could be okay. Maybe they just want to keep Covington. They certainly wanted the hell out of him at the trade deadline. That's kind of it, man. I mean, I think the big thing has got to be the coach getting Harden moving a little bit more, and maybe next trade deadline when we're a year down the road and whatever else, maybe then you could make some sort of a move at the deadline if some decent players available. I mean, I don't know. Could they get in on like Dennis Schroeder if OKC's going to tear it down? I think that's possible. Does a Covington for Schroeder move make sense? I guess it does. What's going to happen with Daniel House? Is it possible for House to even be on the team moving forward, or has that bridge just been burned? Because I'll tell you right now, if he is suddenly available, I would really like for my Celtics to acquire him, because he is a solid bench player, but that's a whole different thing, and honestly not that significant in the grand scheme of everything. But yeah, man, Houston's got a lot of decisions to make. I think it could be huge in terms of maybe a Westbrook trade, although I really don't think that's going to happen. It's probably just going to have to be making a bunch of moves that don't appear huge, but when you put them all together, combined with a new coach who can just have these guys accept parts of the game that they've completely outlawed, and as a result makes them easier to game plan against in the postseason, then perhaps that's how you turn this thing around. You know, they are pushing up against the clock at this point. You know, James Harden is now 31, which is really not that old. I mean, he's probably got at minimum 4 years left of being an elite player, so they've definitely got a few more swings at it, but I do think whatever happens this offseason can kind of set them up for the last real attempt at getting Harden and this team a championship. So that's it for me on this one. If you made it this far, consider liking and subscribing. If not, I appreciate it nonetheless. And that's it.